Hello YouTube and fellow collectors, this is Eric J and welcome to the channel. Today is my first video in a video that I describe some of the hobbies and activities I got into outside of sports cards collecting, and actually got me to stop collecting sports cards for quite a few years. I thought this would be an interesting series just to show the type of things I got interested in that were not necessarily sports cards related. I had collected primarily baseball cards from 1984-85 until around 1994. One of the hobbies that replaced sports cards collecting for me was collecting tradable card games. This particular game that I've got here is a Star Wars game called Star Wars Customizable Card Game by Decipher that came out in 1995, actually late 1995. This video will be the first to showing some of the cards from this particular game, as you know, it drew my interest. I was a Star Wars fan, am a Star Wars fan. I'm also, as one of my other hobbies, I do play board games, play card games, so this is right up the alley of things that I like to do. So for this first video, I am showing the premiere set from Star Wars CCG. This is the limited set, so they're black bordered cards. There are 324 cards in this set. Split rarity, as with a lot of collectible games. I mean, if you're familiar with Magic, if you're familiar with Pokemon, this game and others, many of these games did use a split rarity system for collectability. There were common cards, uncommon, and rare cards, 108 of each, split evenly between dark side and light side. This was a two-player game that you played one against each other, where you're either the Rebel Alliance light side trying to do your thing, or you were the dark side and Empire trying to do your thing. I'm not going to go into how to play the game, as that there are other videos out on YouTube that can explain that, or on other websites that can explain that, but just showing some of the cards. Now, I have at one point had close to 75,000 of these cards. There's like 11 expansions, I think, for this card game, and I have been purging what I didn't want to keep over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I'm filming this in February of 2019. I decided when I was keeping cards to keep 3 complete sets of the 11 main expansions. So what we'll see here are just the dark side cards, so 3 copies of each dark side card for the premiere set. So we're just going to kind of work through them, and you can see these cards, took pictures from the movies and incorporated them onto the cards. Again, I'm not going to go into how to play the game, but I've got these sorted by characters and then other card types as we're going. So we'll just kind of page through them. Let's see, main characters of Darth Vader are in here. Now, the rarity system in here, that the more desirable cards were rare. And in the earlier sets, like this particular set, where we had 15 card packs with 1 rare, 4 uncommon, and 10 common, split evenly between light and dark side. Even in the rarity tier, like with Darth Vader, there were 2 tiers of rares. There's a rare 1 and a rare 2. Vader was a rare 1, so these were rarer than some of the other rare cards. So it did take quite a few packs and quite a bit of trading to get to a lot of these cards that I have. Now, the reason I had so many cards is that when the game went belly up around 2000, 2001, that time frame, other friends that I had that played the game, I just bought their entire collections. So that's part of the reason I had so many of these cards. I did play semi-competitively at like local game stores. Never got to any large tournaments or anything of that nature. Wasn't really interested. Just looking for, to the large tournaments. Just looking to play at some semi-competitive level. But in any case, as we thumb through the characters, if you're familiar at all with Star Wars, you might recognize some of these characters from the movies. It's like Grand Moff Tarkin's a little bit larger character than, say, General Tag, who you only see in one or two scenes. What was neat about this game to me is that it would take any picture that it found in the movies, and if it was something, even a background character, turn them into a card that you could play with. So from that standpoint, it gave you a lot of feeling of being in the Star Wars universe, and for a card game, that was kind of a unique setting. But yep, there are, in this particular binder, 3 times 162 cards. So as was, 486 cards. This is 3 of each. So yeah, I really enjoyed playing this game. Now, some of these cards were actually quite useless in the gameplay, but didn't matter. Still wanted to collect them all. A lot of them, as you're chasing some of the more expensive cards at the time, like the Darth Vader, which still holds a reasonable value considering that this card game isn't heavily played anymore. Still interesting cards to me, but some of these cards were not as useful as others. Green ones, devices. Red cards, you get effects that stick around in the gameplay for a while. Get interrupts, which basically take one-time effect and move on with gameplay. But you can even see, like here, this card disarmed. That's just a quick capture of a scene where C-3PO had fallen and lost his arm when Luke and C-3PO were looking for R2-D2 and ran into some Sand People Tusken Raiders. So yeah. So this card game basically occupied most of my college years, since that was primarily the time that I was collecting and playing this game. And keep thumbing through some more of these. No, I did play Magic at the same time, and if anybody is familiar with Magic, you'll know that some of the early cards from 1993 and 94 are quite expensive. I actually don't have any of those cards anymore. I sold those off years ago. One of those cases where decided to move on from that game, cashed out, and kind of wish I would have held on to some of those cards. If you look at current prices, these cards never got to that level of collectability and value. And most of what you see in here are going to go for pennies, kind of like a lot of junk wax cards from the late 80s into the early 90s. Early sets like this premiere set was pretty heavily produced, and there was an unlimited version, a white bordered version of these cards, so they're readily available to the player base. And the fact that the game isn't super heavily played, there isn't a super high demand for them. So if you're looking for an idea on price, late 80s, early 90s junk wax era baseball cards would be comparable, where you can get thousands of these cards for pennies without too much trouble. At least the earlier sets. Some of the later sets, if I get around to showing them, are quite a bit rarer and hold a little bit more value, but we're not talking about thousands of dollars. We're talking at most a couple $100 for a set. Now some of the sealed product can be pricey, but I don't have any sealed product for this. It's all what I have open, and I've just kind of kept around. See, we kind of thumbed through a bunch of locations that were in the movies, and now the blue cards are all the vehicles, starting with starships, like Star Destroyers. Even creatures that were ridden around, like the Mantha is something that the Sand People were riding. So I do like looking at these cards these days and seeing a lot of, since they're primarily original trilogy Star Wars, they hold a special place for me. And so this is the last of the cards. And that is all of them. So as I mentioned, I'll create a playlist of these and add future videos with just showing some of the cards from some of the sets. I'll jump back and forth between light side and dark side, just so you can see them. And this will, again, first of few videos just to give you an idea of what got me away from sports card collecting. If you enjoyed seeing this, feel free to leave a like. Subscribe if you want to. Feel free to leave a comment. It's all appreciated. Look forward to talking to you all in a future video. Thanks. Bye.